What's going on, everyone? Hunter Doyle here from Philly Insider. We had a move made by the Phillies today, so we're going live to talk about it. We went live for the Spencer Turnbull signing on Super Bowl Sunday, so that was fun to talk about. I'm excited to dive into this. I've kind of gone back and forth on it all day in my mind. Honestly, the whole offseason, I know a number of people have suggested Merrifield to me as a possible Phillies free agency target. Now he is actually a Philly. They hang him to a one-year deal. It is $8 million. So how it works out is there's a club option. If the Phillies decide to opt into that club option, he will end up getting $7 million this year, but then he'll get $8 million next year. If he does not get the next year on it, he will get $8 million this year. So he's guaranteed $8 million either way. Just depends on how it works out. So it could end up being a 2-year deal. He could just be here for this year. We don't know. But that's the nice thing. It's a 1-year deal. There's not a lot of risk involved with that, obviously. I have a lot of thoughts. Unfortunately, Drew is not here. He may join at some point. I haven't heard from him, though. But I was kind of hoping he was going to hop on just because we do have different views on this, and I think that is good. I think where I'm at now versus it's a good thing I did not go live when the news first broke or that I was not able to go live. Because I'm not going to lie, I was not a huge fan of the signing when it first happened. And I'm not saying I've made a complete 180. I've completely turned around on this. We will also get to this, Jose. I did see that that the Phillies signed David Dahl. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Not as big of a signing, obviously, but I do think that is somewhat interesting. So we will get into that. But like I said, I didn't do a complete 180 from where I was at the start of the day. You can ask Sean. I've talked to Sean about Whit Merrifield probably the whole offseason. The first time I talked to Sean, I was very not sold on it. The second time I talked to Sean about it, I was kind of coming around on it. The third time I talked to Sean, I was back to where I was at the start. And then I kind of did that whole cycle all over again today. So here we are. Whit Merrifield is a Philadelphia Philly. Everything good? Let me know, guys. Am I lagging? Is everything all good? You guys can hear me? Keep me updated on that. And if there's any background noise, let me know too. I can't really control that, unfortunately. New heating system and everything. But yeah, let me know if I'm coming through okay, if I sound okay, if the pictures come through okay. Let me know. But with that said, guys, Whit Merrifield is a Philadelphia Philly. He was an all-star last year, obviously. Played for the Toronto Blue Jays. Had a pretty strong start to the year. Did not finish the year very well. He did hit 252 after the all-star break. There's a lot to talk about with this. So I don't know necessarily where to start. I think I'm going to start with the positives because I have a lot of pros and cons that I've gone through, like I said, throughout the day. Appreciate it, Jonathan. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys for all being here. I appreciate you guys, especially for late night. Again, like I said, I apologize. This is the earliest I could have gone live to talk about this. So I wish I could have gone live right when the news broke, but unfortunately I was just busy today. So I appreciate all y'all sticking with me. But that being said, first off, the positives. What I will say is Merrifield throughout his career has hit very, very well versus lefties. And obviously, I know he's hit well as a whole. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't hit well versus righties. I'm just saying the Phillies, one of the things we identified with this team was we did need a right-handed bat that could play the outfield and that could hit against lefties. He does check those boxes. And I do appreciate that. I appreciate that the Phillies went out and got someone who did that. He also checks the box of the bench was awful last year. And I don't think he's your typical bench piece. He is going to play a decent bit. Point being, though, I think he is kind of a platoon. So that is also another box checked. He does, like, that is a massive upgrade to the bench. The bench was absolutely garbage last year. And unfortunately, that probably does push Pache out. And we will talk about that. But where was I? He does hit well versus lefties. And again, like I said, I'm not saying he doesn't hit well versus righties. Obviously, he hits very well versus righties. The thing I will say, I believe he had an extra base hit over his career. I believe I did the numbers. And these are, like, I rounded up or rounded. Or I think it was like 10 point something and 13 point something when I say these numbers, but they were around 10 and 13. Versus right-handed pitching and obviously more reps. He gets an extra base hit every 13 at-bats. Versus left-handed pitching, it was every 10 at-bats. So definitely seemed to be a little more power throughout his career versus left-handed pitching. Now, not necessarily last year. His numbers versus left-handed pitching last year were not the best. That does concern me a little bit because I do think that is largely going to be his role here. I think a big part of his role is going to be, all right, there's a lefty on the mound. I am going to be in the lineup when Marsh or for Stott. Probably more so for Marsh, I would guess. I think Stott made some strides versus left-handed pitching last year. I thought Marsh was making some strides, and I do think he got a little bit better, but I can understand not necessarily like they don't think necessarily enough, like better enough to where they can hit him consistently versus lefties. So I do get that. I also do think this gives you some insurance. If Rojas does not play too well and you don't feel good about him at a certain point in the year, I think that it gives you some insurance to where I don't think Merrifield will play center. I would not really love that, to be honest. He's not really that great in left. Who knows? Maybe he's a little more comfortable in center. I don't necessarily think he's that great in center field. I don't think he's necessarily a standout defensively as a whole. We will get into that. I do think at second base, he is pretty, like, definitely above average defensively. I will say that. But as far as the utility infielder thing, I do have some thoughts on that. But I will say if Rojas doesn't pan out, I think they move Marsh to center, and I think they have Merrifield play in left. And, Stott's obviously going to play second. But then you are in the same spot again to where Marsh probably still needs a platoon in center, and you then don't have that. So that is one of the concerns there. But that being said, I do think that's another benefit, is that if Rojas does not necessarily pan out, you do have someone to play left field, and you have that bat that will produce for you at a high enough clip to where if Rojas is producing at that low of a clip, Merrifield will at least give you some offensive production that you could possibly lose. Let's see, other positives. I'm trying to think. I definitely have some. I'll get to the contact thing. What I will say about the contact is he puts the ball in play. And that was another need we identified going into this offseason, was we needed to balance out the lineup a little bit. The strikeouts were very high, and I apologize. I know there's some questions in the chat. I will get to them. But I want to go through my pros and cons, if that's okay. I do think that was one of the needs we identified, was that this team, there's so many strikeouts in the lineup. I mean, it was egregious last year. That's been a big reason for our downfall in the playoffs for the last 2 seasons now, is just you didn't put the ball in play. We've seen other teams in the Astros and D-backs, they have gotten lucky with putting the ball in play at certain times, but they put the ball in play. Good things happen when you put the ball in play. That's the name of the game. I think there is a little bit more to that in the major leagues, obviously. I don't think it's an outdated thing, but I do think that in the major leagues, you need to do a little bit more than that, obviously. And Merrifield does have weak contact. It's not something I see as super sustainable in his career, but coming off the year he just had and going into this year, I think he will produce. I think he's going to put the ball in play with good enough contact to where it's still going to be productive. Like I said, he's above average second baseman. So on any days Stott needs off, or any days where there's a left-handed pitcher and they want Stott to take a break, I'm fine with that. I do think Stott has hit well enough to where they don't need him to sit as much versus left-handed pitching. But if there's a day here and there where there's a lefty on the mound and you want to give Stott a day off, fine. By all means, I'm cool with that. I think that's most of the positives I had, to be honest. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Those were honestly the main points I wanted to hit on, and on the positive side, because I do think that look, he's going to play a good bit, and I think when someone's not playing well, he'll get a little more reps here and there too. Like, I do think the fit makes a lot of sense from that perspective, and I don't have major problems with those positives I mentioned. Like, I don't see major red flags with some of that. Well, some of them I do, but I do think he'll produce at a good enough level and be a good enough fit to warrant the signing. That being said, I guess we'll get into the negatives. I do have more than probably the typical person would have for the signing, because I know a lot of people really do like the signing. I think that is one. This isn't a negative, but I do think that is one thing that does aggravate me a little bit, is that a lot of people said, okay, if they get Whit Merrifield, I'm totally back on with the team. To me, I get it. The offseason was boring. There wasn't a lot going on, but I also understood why the Phillies took that approach. And they also would not have been able to probably make this move at this point if they were not patient and didn't take their time, because I'm sure Whit explored the market. I'm sure he talked to the Red Sox and White Sox about starting there, because I'm sure he would have preferred to start somewhere else rather than take a deal to be a bench piece. I think that's very fair. Like, I would not be surprised if he did consider, if he did want to look into those options first off. But it just frustrates me how some people are now completely on the opposite side, to where it's, this is the best move the Phillies could have made, the perfect move. I'm totally back in on the Phillies. no, the Phillies have been totally fine the whole offseason, in my opinion. This signing, I do think, helps them, but this doesn't change my outlook drastically on the season. I do think that this could give them a slight edge that they didn't have last year, but it also depends largely upon how some of the other guys do. And that is the next point. Again, $8 million compared to what we have left, we still have $17 million remaining. It's not necessarily going to be a huge detriment to us, but I do think that could cut into our money a little bit in that, maybe there is one less move we are able to make at the deadline, because I don't think they'll use all of that $17 million. I think they'll use a decent bit of it, but I do think that could potentially affect things if one, Merrifield doesn't necessarily work out the way I want to. I think he's going to stay on the roster the whole year. I think he will play well enough to stay on the roster. But more so too, it really comes down to, again, I think a big part of this Philly season is how will Rojas, Kerkering, and Sanchez do? And if one or two of them do not pan out, you need a little more flexibility to make moves at the deadline. I think you still have that flexibility, but God forbid you have a couple injuries or something happens to where you need to fulfill 1 to 2 moves at the deadline and you're not able to get a guy or two because they cost a little more than the third luxury tax will allow. That will frustrate me a little bit if they could have done that without the Merrifield move. That will frustrate me. So that's my little caveat with the contract. Again, it's not like they broke the bank for him. That being said, I would have expected him to probably get $8 million to start at second base somewhere. It's a little more than I'd like. I get it. You're going to have to overpay to get him to be a bench piece here too. And again, like I said, he's not your typical bench piece. He's going to play a decent bit. But that is the issue for me there, or the potential issue I could see. And again, if we get to a point where there's multiple guys hurt, some of those guys don't pan out, I understand. Like, I'm not going to be sitting here like, well, they could have replaced all these guys if they didn't make the Merrifield contract. No, there's a certain point and cutoff to where there's too many injuries, there's too many holes that it wouldn't have mattered even if you didn't sign the Merrifield contract. Because $8 million, if we're talking about $24 million compared to $17 million to spend, or whatever the math is, $25 million, and they have like 4 to 5 holes at the deadline, they wouldn't have been able to fill all those holes in one deadline, even without the Merrifield signing. So I want to make that clear too. I also don't think he's the best defensively in left field. That is another concern I have. Now, granted, we aren't playing Schwarber out there this year. He will DH. So that is that. Like, obviously, he's not Schwarber. He's athletic enough to move out there even at 35 years old. But that being said, the bar shouldn't just be better than Schwarber defensively in left field, right? I think there should be some sort of bar set to where it is, good enough defensively. I also think the positional versatility thing is a little bit overhyped. I do think he could play center in a pinch if you need him to. I wouldn't love putting him out there, but I think you could survive more than, obviously, they tried to play Sosa out there in spring last year. You would survive more in center, obviously, with Merrifield than you would with Sosa. So that does give you an extra option there. Again, like I said, I think if Rojas were to go down, I think they would end up playing Marsh in center, or if Rojas didn't pan out, I think they would play Marsh in center and then Merrifield in left. I think that's probably your best defensive outfield. But point being, I don't think he's going to play all over. I think he'll play second base when there's a lefty on the mound. Sometimes, again, I think Stott can hit versus them decently. I think he made strides there last year. Or when Stott needs a day off, he will play second base. I think Merrifield will primarily play left field for us, which, again, I don't love that. But, again, it could be a lot worse. Like, I don't think he's terrible defensively. I just don't think he's the best out there. But I hear a lot of people saying positional versatility. He's never played a game at shortstop. He's played 6 at third base, and he's played 15 at first base. So I don't necessarily think that that's the role he's going to fulfill. I think that's what Sosa is here to do. Obviously, Sosa doesn't play first base, but you do have Merrifield for that. You do have other guys for that too. I would prefer Cave isn't on the roster, but he did play first base last year. Point being, though, I think you have Merrifield here to play those 2 spots, second and left field. 35 years old, $8 million. Not necessarily a bet I'm super high on taking. Again, like that's not. I don't love that, especially since I have felt like Merrifield is declining a little bit. But I think the counterpoint to that you could make is he's not going to play as much as he did last year. I think he will play more than the average bench player. I absolutely do. But I also don't think you're asking him to play as much as you did as Toronto needed him to, right? That is the upside. Is he did fade as the year went on and as he got more playing time, and the end of September was not very good. But I think also he's, like I said, he's not going to play as much. So I think especially versus lefties when he's going to play a little bit more versus them, I think you will see an uptick in his numbers in that regard because he's playing less. It's a smaller sample size because he's playing more versus lefties where he has a little more power there. I do think he could be more productive in that sense. So that's the counterpoint to kind of 35 years old, 8 million, faded out at the end of last year. I think that covers it pretty well. And I have made the Josh Harrison, I don't want to say comparison because I have acknowledged, look, Merrifield's obviously a better player than Josh Harrison, but it does feel like, there is a bit of decline at his age. You're paying him a little more than he probably should be getting. So there is a little bit of a risk there. Again, like I said, you're going to have to overpay to get him, especially if you want him as a bench piece. And, he was probably looking to start somewhere this year at second base. He probably still could have, but maybe he recognizes the role he needs to take on at this point in his career. Very possible. So I also think the other counterpoint I will make, I said that he has a very high contact rate. He doesn't strike out a lot. Love it. The counterpoint I will make to that is a big reason he makes contact a lot is because he chases outside of the zone. And granted, does he have great hand-eye coordination? Yes. Love it. That is an excellent part of his game, and that has been an awesome part of his game in his major league career. But when you are chasing outside of the zone to get that contact and you're not necessarily making the best contact, you're not hitting the baseball super hard, that is where I have concerns about sustaining that success in the back end of your career. So that is the main concern I have with him is the chase rate, because you can chase and whip. That's one thing. I'm glad he doesn't do that. Like that is a whole nightmare crisis averted. But it still doesn't make it good when you do chase and make contact, because while some of those will drop for hits, and like I said, it is nice. We do need to balance out the lineup. We do need to have some guys who put the ball in play and just get lucky sometimes. That does concern me a little bit. But again, like I said, he's not going to be playing as much. So I don't think that'll get exposed throughout the year since he's just not going to see the field as often as other guys will, unless guys go down, unless Rojas doesn't pan out. But I do think he's still going to play a lot. There's going to be guys that go down. And another thing is, another positive I will name is we had Cody Clemens playing last year at certain points. Like, that's not going to happen now. That is nice to know that Merrifield can cover there if needed. Look, no offense to Cody Clemens. Respect to him. He's made it to the major leagues way farther than I ever made it in my baseball career, but I would prefer not to see him in the major leagues this year. I don't think he has much more time left on the 40-man roster, to be honest. I mean, I could see him sticking out the whole year this year, but after this year, I think he could probably replace him with someone else. I don't know. He's okay, AAA def. I don't think he's anything crazy down there. So, so that's kind of honestly, that's kind of my overview. So drop any more comments based off of what I just said. A lot of you guys have already dropped comments. We got 13 people in here. I thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. And let's get into the comments here. So that's kind of what I have on him, honestly. I'm sure I forgot some stuff, but that's the main thing. I know Whit is a good player. He has hit 90 homers, and Phillies have had a lot of interest in him several times in his career. That is correct. His name was always trade bait every year and trade deadline rumors. Yeah, we've been linked to him before for sure. I probably would have liked this move a lot more 4 years ago, but at the same time, I still do overall think this is a solid move for the Phillies. And just fun fact, 30 of his 90 career homers are off of left-handed pitching. So there is that. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think I would be shocked if he signed with a major league team at this point. But welcome in, Furby. Two hit Whit. I'm sure Dombrowski specified his role and he signed off on it. Well, yeah, obviously Merrifield wouldn't have signed here. There's no starting spot for him. So obviously, he obviously signed off on it. But my point being is he probably looked at the market to see if he could get a starting job somewhere else and then possibly looked at the Phillies and then said, you know what, I want to win and I'll accept my role since the market's not really out there for me to start right now. I watched him a lot, Zachary. Thank you for tuning in. Jays fan here. I appreciate the Jays. I love the Jays, but they just, unfortunately, I'm sure, there have been some rough spots in the past couple of years, despite getting better. But no, I've watched Whit a good bit. Hopefully I gave a good breakdown on him. That's what I've seen from what I've watched. But that's what I got on him. I wanted to see Pache get more playing time, but I feel much better about Merrifield taking up bats over J.K. or Harrison. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that I think is a big sticking point here. Look, this is coming from someone, I love Pache. I have always been a big fan of him even before he came to the Phillies. And I understand, look, he does provide some value to this team. He hits really well versus lefties, pretty much exclusively against lefties. That is one of the things that we'll talk about. And he plays exceptional defense in the outfield. But I think when you look at this, obviously for one, yeah, you're going to, if it's between him and Merrifield, yeah, you're going to take Merrifield every day. But I think when you look at this roster, you now have Rojas and Marsh on opening day. And at least that's the plan right now, as long as Marsh recovers well, in left and center field. And you have Castellanos. Castellanos got better last year. He's not a great right fielder, but at the same time, he didn't make an error last year. Ever since moving him more to right center, he's played a lot better. And without Schwarber out there, there's not as much need for a late inning defensive replacement. I love Pache in that role. I think he's awesome in that role. But I also think when you look at his role and the fact that Merrifield, again, while he's not, again, exclusively hitting versus lefties, like he's not exclusively better versus lefties, he can hit left and right. His role is probably going to be mostly hitting versus left-handed pitching. That would be my guess. And if that's the case, then there's not really a spot for Pache anymore. So unfortunately, like that does kind of force Pache out. I'm not saying he's definitely gone, but I would expect him to possibly get traded if he plays well in spring. It's unfortunate. I do think he's a good vibes guy. I do think he meshes really well with the locker room. I think Whit will too. But I just think that's kind of the reality. And I know people will say keep Pache over Jake Cave. Look, I would love to do that. I'm not a Jake Cave fan at all. I love Pache, but the Phillies are probably going to keep Jake Cave because he is a left-handed bench bat. And again, I know people will say that it's stupid reasoning. They should upgrade. I'm not saying Jake Cave should be the left-handed bench bat. They should absolutely upgrade from the left-handed bench bat role. It'd be great if they could get someone like Eddie Rosario. I not highly doubt. I would be surprised if that happened. Not surprised. I don't know what the right word is. I could still see him signing here, but it depends on the price. I don't know if the Phillies would want to use a lot of the remaining money on that move, especially a guy with Merrifield. I don't see Rosario. I mean, Rosario would really not play that much. Merrifield is actually going to play because he's the top bench bat here, and there's a pretty clear defined role for him, I think, here. Harrison, yeah. I don't miss Harrison at all. Great guy. Also, loved watching him when I was younger, but his time is up in the big leagues, I think. Pache is the wild card for me. Injury, that is the other thing with Pache. He is not usually on the field. Whit Merrifield, fun fact, that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Merrifield played 3 years in a row where he did not miss a single game. I think it was 2019, then the COVID year, and then 2021. Played all 162 games in 2019 and 2021, and he played all 60 in the COVID year. Like, you just don't see that often. This past year, he played 145. The year before that, he played 139. The guy he really doesn't get hurt. So even though he's a bench bat, he probably won't play all 162 with us, and again, like I said, that could be a good thing because maybe he won't phase out as much at the end of the year. He's going to be a reliable backup for you who's always on the field. I think that's another factor in it. I think there's untapped potential there too, Sean, but I also understand Pache doesn't really move the needle enough to keep him around right now. Again, this is coming from someone, I love Pache. I really do. I really do love Pache. I think he's awesome. I love what he brings to the game, what he can contribute, but I also understand why he might be the odd man out. And again, I do think it's probably the right move. I like JK as a person, but both him, yeah. And that's the thing. It's Pache, at least he hits well versus lefties. JK doesn't even hit well in his role, unfortunately. Just trying to give JK a ticket on the next train out of Philly. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, Ethan. And until I see it happen, I will believe it. But I think they would need a left-handed bat to upgrade. And we will talk about David Dahl, who they just signed on a minor league deal. Maybe he ends up playing well in spring training and makes the roster. I do like that signing. I think it's a good camp signing, but I'm not banking on David Dahl winning that spot right now. So we'll see. Rojas is a huge question mark for me. Yeah, I think he is for everyone right now. I'm sure he gained muscle mass. Can he learn the strike zone? Can he hit his weight? Unsure. That's the thing, is you can't develop pitch recognition and get live in-game reps in the offseason. You can bulk up as much as you want, but at the end of the day, we all are kind of in a wait-and-see mode with Rojas. And I think the Phillies do want to give him that opportunity. They have a little bit of insurance with Merrifield. I'm not sure it's solidified insurance because, again, like I said, if he has to play more than he probably should, I don't think that'd be a great scenario where Rojas doesn't pan out. Best case scenario is Rojas just plays well enough, at least hits well enough, right? And lays off enough out of the zone that his defense is just providing enough at that point. But again, it comes down to play discipline with him. It comes down to not being just a free swinger up there at the plate. That's the big question mark for Rojas. And that's only going to get better with in-game reps. So they got to give him the first couple months, I think, and see how he does. Merrifield does have 90 homers. Bench hitters with 100 homers are always bonus in my book. Yeah. He's not really a power hitter, but again, like I said, he's got a little more power from the left side of the plate. And David, welcome in. Good to see you. How are you? I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well too, David. Appreciate you asking. Other topic we can talk about is Bohm winning his arbitration. That's a great point. We will bring that up in a little bit. I believe he deserved to win. He is worth $4 million. I agree, David. I mean, actually, we'll talk about it right now. I'll keep it quick and I'll keep it short and sweet. I mean, look, between 4 and 3 and 3.4 million. Cool. I don't really care what price is agreed upon at that point. He's, as much as I think Bohm does have flaws in his game, I also think he brings a lot to the table too, and very much like 4 million. That's fine. Does this open his spending? Rob, welcome in. Good to see you in here. And welcome to the channel. I don't know if I've seen you before here, but I don't necessarily think it's going to open a spending spree necessarily. I think they do want to save some flexibility for the deadline, but we will see. David Dahl, extend. We'll talk about Wheeler a little bit if you guys want at the end. I think I got through all the older comments, so I'm going to have to go through. Actually, I did not. Believe me, this helps for a bench piece. I am pleased. It definitely helps for a bench piece, but I still want Bellinger or Trout as a star piece and Montgomery as a third pitcher. I would not get your hopes up about Bellinger or Trout. I think those are highly unlikely. The Angels said they're not trading Trout. Bellinger, I don't see that happening. I just don't think the Phillies would be in on him, to be honest, especially I think he still wants a good price tag. I don't think the price or the years would go down enough to where the Phillies would be in on him. And that's kind of where I'm at with Montgomery too. If it went down to 1 to 2 years from Montgomery, maybe, but I still don't necessarily think that's – I think it's more possible than Bellinger. I don't think the Phillies are truly, truly in on Montgomery. I'm sure they're monitoring the market, and I'm sure they talk to him, right? Like that I would be surprised if that didn't happen. That's kind of stating the obvious, but I really want Cody Bellinger, but as long as we get a really good bat, I'll be happy. I think the team as constructed right now is pretty close to what it's going to be on opening day. So that's kind of just where I'm at, David. Somehow deal Walker again, like you said, it's not impossible, but like you said, I wouldn't say it's very likely. I have heard the contract isn't viewed as bad around the league, and I understand that innings are very valuable. But at the same time, I just don't see a world in which they're going to be able to move Walker and sign Montgomery and make that possible. And I think Walker showing up to camp and being there, and I think at this point he is probably going to be in the roster this year. Again, I'm not a huge Taijuan Walker fan. I get why he's here, but I just don't think I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. Worst case scenario, if we can't deal Walker, then DFA him. That's a lot of money to eat. That he still has 3 years on the contract. I believe he signed for 4 for 72. So that would not be a great scenario in my opinion. I think if we got to that point, like you might as well just trade his contract if you can to eat a little bit of the money rather than DFA him and just eat all of it, if possible. Josh Harrison can be picked up. I mean, we were the dummy team that picked up Josh Harrison though. So, I'm sure there's a team out there that maybe they would take Taijuan's contract, but I don't know. I don't see it happening anytime soon, at least. I could see them maybe moving it next year when half the deal is up. I don't know though. Ideally, I want Sanchez as my 5th starter. I'm with you, Sean. He has to be the 5th starter. You have a guy who is still in pre-arbitration years, who has developed well, at least this past year he has. There are very good underlying numbers that suggest that he could very well be a very good pitcher. If he doesn't do it this year, okay, you figured that out. But I'm not just going to say, throw it off and say, oh, it's just 1 year, No, there's underlying data that states that Christopher Sanchez has a lot of potential. Especially as a 5th starter. You have to see what he can do this year, I think. And if he isn't good enough, you pivot at the deadline and you go get someone like Kyle Gibson, or Noah Syndergaard. Not those guys, but those types of guys we've gotten in the past 3 years at the deadline. You pivot at that point, but you don't pivot off of Sanchez just because you don't think he can replicate it. I think the Phillies have a pretty good. I think they have confidence that he could replicate. I don't know about replicate, but I think they have confidence he can have a good year. Who's available? Who's 280, 300 lefty bench bat that is still free agent? I don't know if Rosario hit that last year. He's probably one of the better lefty bats. But again, I like Eddie Rosario. I just don't. I think with the Merrifield signing, I would be surprised if they added him because, Eddie's he really is not going to play much in Philadelphia if he signs here. That's kind of where I'm at. So we got a few more comments here. Let's see. Does Ian like the move? I mean, I think he's kind of where I'm at, honestly. Like, I think, I don't know. I mean, I talked to him a little bit about it today. I would probably say he leans more towards where I am, but that's kind of the extent of I can give you. I don't want to speak for Ian, but did we trade for? If you're talking about Merrifield, no, we did not. We signed him as a free agent. Troy, welcome in. Good to see you in here. I'm fine with it. Yeah, I mean, I also have like, again, like I said, I'm not like fully sold on it. Like yes, this is the perfect move, but I think the way I laid it out, like pros and cons. Look, I think the pros are good enough to sign him. I do think it was a little pricey. I do think there's obviously some flaws in Merrifield's game, but I also think he obviously upgrades the bench. There's just some concerns I have about him at his age and his play style. I forgot the other thing I said, or meant to say, the speed. I know speed is has been a fairly big part of Merrifield's game. Maybe not the biggest part, but it has been a part of his game. He got caught stealing 10 out of 36 times last year. That's a little too high for my liking. So he needs to be smarter on the base paths this year. I don't know if that was jumps. I don't know if that was him slowing down a little bit. I don't know. I didn't watch enough to know exactly how he was getting thrown out on the base paths. I would have to check that. Point being, it can't happen, though. You can't get caught stealing 10 times if that is a pretty decent part of your game. And if that is the speed declining a little bit, and if the left field defense has any indication of that, maybe it is jumps in both left field and on the base paths. I don't know. Point being, it's got to be a little bit better in that regard. But that's the last negative I'll have. I gave a lot of pros and cons, I feel like, to kind of even out. Christmas isn't far off. Hook me up with that powder blue Merrifield uni. Yeah, Sean, if you want to make a donation to the channel and pay for it yourself. Just kidding. Why did Marsh wait so long to get surgery? What's wrong with the medical staff? So, 3-card Monty, welcome in, by the way. It was reported that Marsh just kind of felt something off while he was doing his workouts and stuff in the offseason. So I don't think it was necessarily something he felt earlier. I don't think I was also in the same camp as you. I was confused as to why the surgery had just happened, but I think it was something that just kind of came up recently that he kind of felt, and then they were like, all right, we got to get this operated on. So yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily something they could have done earlier. But I do remember he slammed into that wall in the outfield this year. So I wonder if that contributed to it and then maybe something came up later. I don't know. But yeah, Sean, that's kind of what I was saying. Like, I don't think David Dahl, like, he hasn't played too well in recent years. Obviously, his 2019 year was very good. He was an all-star, believe that or not. He hit 302 the whole year. It's okay in the outfield. I mean, he's not great. He's not terrible. He's fine, right? Like, I think he's going to give you fine defense out there. If he plays well enough in spring training, I would love for him to push Jake Cave out of the bench spot and the left-handed bench bat role. Like, I think that would be great if he could. I don't need him to do what he did in 2019. I just need a little bit of that, right? Enough to at least warrant being on the bench, and he needs to adjust to a bench role too. So I'm cool with it on a minor league deal. We'll see how he does in camp. But, I think it's probably Jake Cave's spot to lose, unfortunately. Again, I'm not saying it should be, but until they sign another guy, I think it's either David Dahl pushes him out or it's probably Jake Cave's spot. When is Crawford MLB ready? He's still got a little bit of time, 3-card Monty. He made his way up to Jersey Shore last year. He's still got some time to develop. The big thing with him is the power, because if you watch a lot of his highlights, it's a lot of ground balls, it's a lot of bouncing balls, and they get through for hits. But it'll be interesting to see if the power develops. Defense is incredible from what I've heard and from what I've seen too. Definitely. I mean, it was like with Rojas. When Rojas got here and when he started playing in the minors, there was a lot of points when he was in the minor leagues where you heard he was major league ready defensively. That was no surprise that he came up and his first catch is obviously him slamming into the wall and making an incredible play. That didn't surprise me in the slightest because of what I had heard and seen from the minor leagues. But with Crawford, it's kind of similar vibe. His defense is awesome. Obviously, he gets the bat to the ball. He's got a lot of speed on the base paths, but we will see if the bat, if he can develop a little more power. Again, he just got here. Like, last year was his first full season, so he's got time. But it's going to take some time, though. We will see. I wouldn't rule out him being a candidate for a trade at some point in the next year or two. I'm not saying that will happen, but I could see it happening in the right trade. Give me Clase. I just don't think that's going to happen. The Phillies are not an organization that necessarily seems to want a capital C closer for whatever the reason. And look, there are pros and cons to that. I think when you have Alvarado, he's getting the middle of the order every single time in the playoffs. That we know that for a fact. You need 3 outs in the ninth still. You do still need a guy to do that. But I think the Phillies, I don't think they see the value in trading a haul for Clase when he's only going to pitch 1 inning. And I do like Clase. Took a little bit of a step back. Still really, really good. His stuff obviously is incredible. I've always been a fan of him. Like I loved when Cleveland got him. But I don't think Cleveland's going to trade him. The guy's still got years of control on his contract, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they're going to get they're going to wait for a much better deal than we can give them too. Because look, our farm has gotten better under the current management, but it is not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's a good farm just yet. There's a lot of guys at the lower levels, but when you don't have a lot of depth at AA and AAA, that means that when guys get over that hump, they're not necessarily making that transition very well. So we're going to have to see how that pans out. You got to give this organization, the front office and the management, more time before we, say the farm is just cursed, but and plenty of more time. But I believe Marsh believes he usually starts April and May slowly, so maybe he got the surgery to get stronger. So I think I cleared up why he got the surgery now. As long as Merrifield plays, and sorry guys, I know I'm a little behind on these comments, but bear with me. As long as Merrifield plays 95 to 110 at bats, that I think he'll get more than that, to be honest. I think he definitely will. JK, yeah. I mean, he did have his moments, but again, I would really prefer they are able to upgrade from him. I'm calling it now. David Dahl wins the bench spot opening day. Hey, I hope so. I would love if he got this bench spot over JK. I think that's honestly best case scenario. But as we've seen, it is tough because JK was a spring training standout last year. And those guys go from playing every day to then having to accept their role as a bench bat and learn to be a bench bat. So, Mr. Rudy, I would not be opposed to Liam Hendricks. I mean, obviously he's got the Tommy John. So, obviously he's not going to pitch as the year starts. Sorry, I was just checking something on my phone. Family stuff, but I apologize. I got a little distracted there. But look, I think Liam Hendricks, he's obviously been he's had multiple good years as a reliever. He's obviously had a good track record. So I'm definitely not opposed to it. Tommy John, it takes a little bit of time to come back, but that's almost, in a sense, Mr. Rudy, that's like almost kind of like a deadline acquisition for you. And if he is cheaper because of the injury, by all means, man. I am cool with that. So, I would totally be on board with that. Sorry, again, I got distracted there, but I'm good now. I would totally be on board with that. I think if you can get him at the right price, I think Hendricks would make a lot of sense as that guy to solidify the bullpen. I don't know if the Phillies are actively looking for that, but they did kind of, Dave did kind of hint that, I believe. He didn't say it outright, but I think he did say there was like a starter and high. I don't know what he exactly said, but he was kind of hinting at all right, we wanted a guy who then got a role as a starter, Jacob Junis / Jordan Hicks, maybe. It could be either of those. And then the other guy he mentioned was pretty clearly Robert Stevenson too. So it's not to say they're not looking for those guys. And I think if they got Liam Hendricks on the right deal, I could totally see that. I heard Kenley Jansen is hurt. Trade talk involving him is over for now. I didn't really want him, to be honest, Sean. Look, his contract is expiring, so he'd be off the books at the end of the year. But, the only way I'd do it is if Taiwan was included in that deal, and I think the Red Sox would probably hang up the phone at that point. They're not taking on that contract. Not that he wouldn't help them in 8 innings, but it's just you're not trading the $16 million remaining on Kenley Jensen's salary that you're going to lose in the offseason and then get some more space to then pick up all that space from Taiwan. As far as Jansen goes, look, I still think he's had an awesome career. He was electric as a closer with the Dodgers. He's had some really good seasons. I just don't know at this point in his career if that's necessarily the right move to make. So I'm not really there. I'm not really with the Kenley Jansen stuff. Would I hate it? No, I wouldn't hate it. I just don't know if that's a surefire fix to the closer role. And I think you could end up with some of this, some similar issues to what you had with Kimbrel at the end of the year. I think the Orioles are going to pick up Montgomery with Bradish injured. That could very well happen, Jonathan. And they are very much a team, even though they got Burns, they could absolutely use another starting pitcher. So I think it would make a lot of sense for them. I don't know what their money situation is. I don't know how much they're looking to spend, what thresholds they don't want to go over, what they're willing to go over. So I can't really speak on that. But just from a logical perspective of, yes, they need pitching. Yeah, that would be awesome for them. Jansen is watched, but I would take him to get, there you go. So you read my mind before I even got to your comment, but yeah, I would do that too. I just don't think Boston would do it. Jonathan says, and thank you guys. We got 17, 20 people in here consistently. I appreciate y'all. And I know I'm behind on the comments. I'm getting all of them. I started a little late on the comments. So thank you guys. I think the Phillies need to give Walker at least until the deadline. Too much money and years tied up with him to dump him after only one full season. Yeah, I think it's just the fact, Jonathan, that he did not pitch too well in the 2 years before he came to Philadelphia. Like I'm not saying he was terrible. It was just we saw that second half collapse, and we saw some similar issues with the velo and all that. There were times where his velo was high, but that is the big concern. I don't know what the reason was. I don't want to say I hope he was injured last year. Obviously, I would hope he's at full health, but you almost hope that was the reason for it so that his velocity isn't as much of an issue this year. I think hopefully I phrased that correctly. I hope I didn't give off the impression that I hope he was hurt. I definitely would not wish that on anyone. But point being, I'm with you on that though, Jonathan. Like I don't think they can dump him right now. Like I said, I think after this year, it could become a possibility to where, you've got half the contract left. Maybe you dump him at that point if he still isn't playing well and you just want to get off the money. But yeah, hopefully I explained myself well on that. Do you think you should have gotten Hader? Look, Hader's awesome. He's had a 1 ERA in multiple seasons, but 5 years for $95 million, that's a lot. And I think it made sense for the Astros. Look, the Astros aren't a team that, contrary to popular belief, I feel like there's kind of this connotation that they spend a lot. They don't. Like, they develop a lot of their guys, and then they cash in on a couple free agents here and there, like Hader. And it's kind of like the final piece. And I think it made a lot of sense for them. They have some guys in the bullpen. He's going to be the closer there. I think that's awesome for them. Obviously I don't like the Astros, but I think that makes a lot of sense for them. As far as the Phillies go, I don't think that would have made a lot of sense for them to spend that money that way when Alvarado is going to pitch versus the heart of the order in the 8th anyway. And yes, like I said, you do need those 3 outs, but $95 million for a guy who only pitches 1 inning at this point in his career, I probably wouldn't have done that. And Hader is awesome. Like I loved Hader in Milwaukee because that guy would go in the playoffs. I watched that guy go 2-3 innings in some games. Like that dude was a workhorse out of the pen, and he was a dog. Like he was their guy out of the pen in those years. He doesn't do that anymore. He's a 1-inning guy now. So he's still awesome in the 1 inning he pitches, but I probably just wouldn't have done that deal for that reasoning. If the Phillies were going to go over the 3rd luxury tax, now that changes the conversation. I probably would, I probably wouldn't be super opposed to that. But my point being, keeping in mind that the Phillies aren't going over that 3rd threshold, I wouldn't have wanted to spend the money that way, and I don't think they would have. Off topic, but the lettering on these uniforms got awful. Oh my gosh, Sean, I'm glad you brought this up. Yeah, it's been absolutely garbage. Like, I don't know how you messed that up. That is one of the easiest things to get right. All you had to do was go out there and put out the same jerseys with a Fanatics logo on them. And here we are looking at nameplates. The beat reporters say they can't even see them from 10 feet away. What are we doing? I'm glad you brought that up, Sean. I really am glad you brought that up. Slightly off topic, do you think we get old Trey Turner at bats in 2024 or just second half Trey Turner stats in 2023? I'm a little confused by that question. If you could clarify what you mean. Do you mean like old Trey Turner as in like past prime Trey Turner, which we're hoping we'll get this year, or like old as in he's older? So if you could clarify that, that'd be great. To answer your question though, like I think Trey's going to be really good this year. Like I would really hope, I don't even need him to do what he did in the second half of, or after August 8th, I think it was. I don't even need him to perform at that high of a level. I just need consistency throughout the year. I don't need anything crazy. Just need him to be solid. That's kind of what I'm expecting from Trey. I am expecting him to perform at a high level. We did pay him a lot of money. I am expecting him to very much perform to how he performed in the past, and not like he did at the start of last year. But I think the second half or the August 8th to the end of the year, I mean, he was on an unreal tear. To do that over a full year would be very tough. So I think it's a little much to expect out of him, but I do expect a lot from him, to answer your question. Hopefully, I was trying to find the right way to phrase that, but hopefully that helps. Hader's not a Phillies type player, not enough grit. He does have some fire in him when he does get going. But again, for the reasons I already stated, I'm not I wouldn't have loved it. I still think Hader would be awesome. I think he's an awesome closer. But again, I don't think it would have made a lot of sense. I think it's the better way to say it. What's up, Marlon? Good to see you in here. David Dahl. Yeah, David Dahl. I also like that signing too. I think that makes some sense for us. Probably not worth cutting this up into a separate video for David Dahl, but I still think it makes sense. So we bring back David Buchanan. Is Pinto back too? I know he just pitched in the Caribbean series. So I didn't see that. That's interesting. The David Buchanan one, I actually didn't want to talk about that, but I didn't know he brought back Pinto as well. Let me check on that real quick. Is that confirmed? Yeah, minor league contract. Wow. Hey, good for him, man. I mean, look, that was a guy who I thought had some potential as a prospect. Didn't really pan out. Just pitched in the Caribbean series, like I said. So wish him the best. As far as David Buchanan goes, I mean, that guy definitely made a name for himself over in Korea. He went over to Japan first, I believe, and then went to Korea. Good for him, man. I mean, he had a 2.5 ERA last year in Korea. I believe his walks went down too. I think he was a little rough at the start of his time in Japan and Korea, but his last 4 years have been really good over there. So I think he should provide them with some AAA depth. Hopefully, we will see how he performs in the spring. I'm interested to see how Buchanan looks. It's a cool story. Like, he obviously pitched pretty well in 2014, then completely fell off after that, unfortunately. But always a guy I liked, always a class act, a good guy. And it's weird. Like, he was here at the start of the rebuild as one of the younger players, and now he is on the Phillies roster as we are contending as the oldest player in camp. Isn't that wild? Like, that blows my mind. So wow, came full circle. But I'm ready for him. Or hopefully not Kyle Kendrick. No offense to the guy, got a World Series with us, but I saw Kyle Kendrick pitch about every day when I was a kid, and somehow it landed on the days when the four aces weren't pitching. So I actually did like Vance Worley, but Duckworth, that's a throwback, man. I remember him on MVP Baseball 2003. Did he throw a no-hitter? Am I thinking of the right guy? I might be wrong. I don't know. Vance Worley, man, I actually do have a Vance Worley t-shirt in my closet. I was a big fan of the Vanimal his first year here, and unfortunately didn't have too much sustained success, but he was good for a time. The bench is going to be nasty. Well, at least Whit will be. I like Sosa still. I think David Dahl, we will see. Jay Cave, I mean, obviously I've stated on him. I really don't have much confidence in him. Stubbs, I really wish they had a better backup catcher, to be quite honest. But I understand Stubbs is cheap. It is what it is. We did a whole podcast on the bench about a week ago before Merrifield got here. So go take a listen. Give that a listen if you can. It's improved. I agree, Sean. It is improved. It is not. It's not a top tier bench. That being said, it's hard to get a top tier bench. Everything has to fall into place. But point being, though, I do think there are some flaws there, and obviously that's why they're bench players. But at the same time, you would ideally like some of those flaws to not be exploitable throughout the year. And I think, you'd like guys who, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but point being, I think they have a solid bench right now. Merrifield makes it a lot better, but I also kind of see Merrifield as a 10th player rather than a bench piece. He is a bench piece by definition, but I think he's going to play a lot more than the rest of these guys. So, this is most likely going to be bench. It'll be Whit. It'll be David, probably / Jay Cave. It'll be Sosa, and it'll be Stubbs. Pache, I would love to keep him here. I like that he's a younger guy. I like that he brings defense. I like that he hits against left-handed pitching. But again, like I stated before, there are a number of reasons why it would probably not make sense for him to be on the roster. They're going to keep 4 bench guys. I really would be surprised if they keep 5, at least for the whole season. Maybe Pache does make the opening day roster. Maybe they keep 5, or maybe they do just make the move. They're like, all right, the left-handed bench bet isn't worth it. We'll just keep Pache. That would surprise me. I think Pache is unfortunately the odd man out. But we will see. We will see. Sean isn't counting him out. We need one lefty and one righty. I think we definitely need a lefty. I think we're pretty set on righties on the bench. Hunter, I know he imploded last year, but is Connor Brogdon still a guy who can win a pen job with solid spring? I think he can. Yes, Sean, I think to answer your question, he definitely can. Absolutely, he can win a pen job. Do I think he will is another question. I don't know if I believe he can, just because he had a rough year last year. I don't know if I see him bouncing back from that. The changeup is awesome. Like, it's always been a plus pitch, but I don't know. It was a rough year last year in the majors and the minors. So I don't see it happen. Like, I don't see him making the roster as of right now. I agree with you. He certainly can. But I don't know. I think it's going to be tough because if you think about it, Sean, they now have a couple guys vying for the roster spot. And the advantage that you could say Brogdon has is he doesn't have any minor league options. So he is either on the roster or he is somewhere else. There is no in between unless he passes through waivers and then, sticks around with the team. I don't know if he would pass through waivers. I think someone would probably claim him. I think you're looking at Brogdon, now Caleb Ort, who they just got the other day, who does have potential. His numbers haven't been great, but there is a lot there with the stuff. You have Michael Mercado, who's also competing for a spot. You have Luis Ortiz. He's always he's not always, he's only been here for 2 years, but he's a sleeper for a spot. He's on the 40-man. They added Michael Rucker, who I think he has an option, but I also think he could contribute to the Major League club. Junior Marte will compete for that spot. I could see him getting it. I think ideally he starts in AAA this year. Nothing against, I like Junior Marte. I like what he can bring to the table. I just don't think he's quite ready to be here full time. I think he needs to work on his slider a little bit more. Sinker, I think, is very good, but the slider, I think while the slider moves, he doesn't locate it. He doesn't command it very well. And then, is there anyone else I'm forgetting? I think there might be one guy who I'm forgetting who's on the 40-man who could get a spot. I think that's everyone on the 40-man who is kind of competing for that last spot. But point being, when you consider all that, I do think Brogdon, you think about those names, yeah, he could certainly beat any of those guys out for the spot. But I think you could see one of those guys win the spot too. I know someone who Jack Fritz mentioned who I'm interested in, Ryan Burr. He is, I believe, a reliever they added. A lot of people like to say now, after Hoffman's year last year, that who's going to be the Hoffman guy this year who comes out of nowhere, gets a minor league deal, and just develops. I think people forget, Hoffman did have a sub-4 ERA with the Reds in some time the year before. There was some major league success there. And, obviously the stuff played, it popped off this year. I didn't expect the stuff to be as good as it was. And he was awesome for us. But I also think it is tough to do that year in and year out. I would love if another guy does that. And I think there's potential. There are potential guys here who could do that, like Hoffman did. But I don't know if I necessarily see that. But Ryan Burr is a guy who maybe has that potential to compete for that spot and maybe force the Phillies' hand, add him to the 40-man roster. I don't know. But I think to your point, Sean, Connor Brogdon does have, especially with Bilotti now not on the 40-man, he does have an opportunity to go take that spot, and he could very well end up on the Major League roster. I don't think it's far-fetched at all. Yeah, that would solve the problem if Dahl has a good spring. Yeah, you can never count Pache out, man. That he's a dog. I would love if he stays. Again, I think if there is going to be an odd man out, it would probably end up being him. Again, I would, like I said, I'm a Pache fan. I don't like Jake Cave as a bench piece. I'm sure he's a great guy, but between those two guys, I would much rather have Pache. I understand why Cave would make the roster, unfortunately, over him. But if Dahl, ideally, I think Dahl forces their hand and just plays well and becomes that left-handed bat. That would be awesome. Yeah, if Dahl plays well, it'll be bye-bye both of them, unfortunately. Buchanan and Pinto are cheap. One-year investments, Philly have a strong tendency to get a top-notch hitter and or pitcher and invest little contract money on cheaper players. Yeah, I don't think they're going to do a major deal this offseason outside of they already did the Nola deal, but they've spent a lot of their money. They brought in a lot of their big names already. Again, it's about getting guys like Merrifield who kind of fill in the other spots on the team. Brogdon reminds me of Ryan Madsen, who I loved. Yeah, I remember you saying that a number of times. But, yeah, I mean, he's got a great changeup, man. He definitely – Brogdon, I've always thought, has the potential to contribute, and I think he can contribute in the right role. But I just don't see it happening as successfully as Madsen. Again, that's not a bold take. Madsen had a really strong career. But he could certainly – Brogdon's not old. There's definitely time. But I think the other point I will make, Sean, is – because Brogdon is not, he has no options left, and it's either make the roster or don't, or potentially clear waivers. If he does pitch well in spring training, plenty of reason to trade him too, because you do want to sell high if you can. Now, obviously, if you keep him and he performs well, that would be great. But if the Phillies don't necessarily feel that is sustainable, I could see them definitely shipping him off in spring for the right deal. And I would not be opposed to that if they got a younger guy or, someone else who has a minor league option or something like that. Sure, why not? It has to be the right deal, though, So that's kind of where I'll end on Brogdon. Pinto is nasty. Yeah, I always liked him as a prospect. And we'll see how he looks in spring. I didn't watch him in the Caribbean Series, to be quite honest. So I don't have a ton of information on him. The last time I watched him, I was in high school. So that's going to be weird that he's on the roster now, but we will see. Yeah, Covey has one of the spots too, but I'm not saying Covey is definitively on the roster, but I feel like he has a pretty I don't want to say solidified. I feel like he has a fairly good role on this roster. I think you look at the bullpen, it is Alvarado, Hoffman, Kerkering, Sir Anthony Dominguez. So that's 4 right there. Strom. I got to get back to some of your comments on Strom in the community tab. I was very happy there was a lot of Strom love on there. I think Strom is awesome. Shoot, who's the 6th guy? I am blanking right now. There is someone else who I'm forgetting right now. It is. Did I say Kerkering yet? I didn't say Kerkering. So that I think I assumed I said him. Or sorry, Kerkering and Soto too. So what is that? Sir Anthony, Strom, Soto, Kerkering, Alvarado, Hoffman. That's 6 guys right there, I believe. And then that leaves you with, if you want the long man role, I think Covey is taking that. And that probably leaves you with one more spot. If Covey doesn't perform well, obviously he's not going to make the roster. Like I think that's pretty clear. But if he performs well enough, I think Covey was fine in his role to where I'm totally cool with keeping him. Like if he ends up getting moved at some point, like I'm not going to be up in arms about it. But I do think in his role, he was totally fine. Once he got in the low leverage spots, and as the year went on and they worked on the changeup of cutter with him a little bit more, he seemed to improve. And his numbers certainly got better as the year went along. He actually finished the year pretty strong, in my opinion. He's not a guy who's going to pitch in the playoffs that much anyway. He's kind of just there to eat innings. He does that effectively, in my opinion. I would be cool with that. If he has to start a game, you're in trouble, but that is why you signed a Spencer Turnbull this year and why you signed a couple other guys who are starting pitching depth. So I like Turnbull in that role. We'll see how he does in spring. Obviously, he's a wild card too. We'll have to see. But that's kind of where I see. Vasquez did a very good job in the mop-up role too. And funny enough, a lot of people thought Covey was going to get cut for Vasquez after the trade deadline, but Vasquez was the one who ended up getting waived. And they already had lefties in the pen. Vasquez was already kind of in a mop-up role. I do think his slider, it's interesting. It's a good pitch for him. He's a slower pitcher. It's a change of pace. But again, he wasn't pitching. Vasquez was pitching in high leverage spots. It didn't go too well. He's in the mop-up role. And I think Covey is honestly perfectly fine for that. Again, like I said, I'm not going to be up in arms if he is not in that role, but I do think it's a role that is useful. Keep Pache, Cave, AAA. David, welcome in. I would love that, but again, I think they're going to want a left-handed bench bat on the bench. Like that's I think that's what it comes down to. Unfortunately, I don't think either of them will play very much. I think you would see Pache maybe late in games for Castellanos, but I don't necessarily know. Again, I'll repeat what I said. This is coming from someone I'm a big Pache fan, not a big JK fan. Pache's 2 things are defense, amazing at it, and hitting versus lefties. And I think if he hadn't gotten hurt last year, you probably would have seen him end the year at a much better clip than he did. But I think when those are his only 2 roles, you just picked up Merrifield, who I expect to hit versus lefties. He's not exclusively a hitter versus lefties, like I said, but I expect him to more fulfill that role now. I would be surprised if they kept Pache because I don't think he moves the needle enough to where you already have Rojas and Marsh out there. You might not need him. I do like Pache, but again, if the right trade comes along too, that's also an opportunity. If they can't trade him before the season, I would love to keep Pache and I would probably send Cave down at that point. Again, I'm not saying Cave should be up here. I think they should have a left-handed bat that's better than him. But I think that's kind of what it boils down to be honest. I'll get to this in a second, Sean. Fun question there. I think you can kind of guess my answer, by the way. I just answered that. But or is going to be interesting to see, David says, if he can be a stud for the Phillies. Yeah, I know there's obviously some interesting underlying stats there with the stuff. So we will see how he does. Obviously, a lot of guys have good stuff, but you have to be able to command it. The Phillies obviously have brought a number of guys in to where they're hoping they can fix that. I believe he has a minor league option left. He can start the year in AAA. That is nice. So that's good. I'm very glad about that. I think it's a nice project to take on, and we will see where things go from there. And I think it's good competition to have with Mercado, with some of these other guys like Ryan Burr, who I mentioned, who's not on the 40-man, but is an invitee. Luis Ortiz obviously competing for that spot. Brogdon competing for that spot. It's always good. I think they have a really healthy competition for the last 1 to 2 spots in the pen. Again, off topic, Hunter. No, you're fine, David. I've talked about Merrifield mostly. If you guys got any more to say about Merrifield, let me know. I feel like Sean, you can attest. I wasn't like a huge Merrifield guy. I feel like I was more positive than I probably could have been on Merrifield than probably. Sean, would you say I was more positive on Merrifield in this stream than you probably expected? If not, fine. But I I think I'm definitely more positive than I expected to be too. And I do understand the signing a little bit more as I think through it. Point being, though, totally fine, you're off topic. Who do you believe can be the surprise breakout player, hitter / and/or pitcher in 2024? David, that's a good question. I don't know. I think there's a lot of – no, I don't know. What a great answer. There's some good options pitching-wise. Hitting-wise, I don't think there's a lot of options there, to be honest, because I think there's already – like the lineup's pretty much set. Merrifield was kind of the final piece. Like he's not in the lineup every single day, but again, he's that bench piece who's going to play more often than not. I don't know. I mean, I think the only really options you have, like if you want me to give like a breakout player as in like they really aren't on our radar, like because I think that rules out guys like Stott and Bohm who maybe have better breakout years than they've had. And Bohm, I don't even know if that would count. You could say from the power perspective, if he breaks out, that could be the point. I don't know. Rojas, I guess, would be the one guy you could say on the offense breakout year, but like that's really, that might be the only answer. So I'll give you a pitcher. I am interested to see. I've heard some interesting things about Michael Mercado. He's 6'4" on the mound. Like he obviously has a good frame for the position. He's 24. He can start in the minor leagues as well, rather than being expected to pitch right away in the major leagues. I would keep an eye on him. I think there's some interesting stuff there. We don't have a lot of data on him as fans since he hasn't played in the big leagues and he's mostly been a minor league guy. I think he's only pitched in the minor leagues, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong about that. But I think there is some interest. There is some intrigue there. So I would keep an eye on Mercado. I'm interested to see what he does. But again, like I said, Brogdon or who's the other guy? Ryan Burr, some of these other guys, Rucker as well. Those guys could beat him out. I like Rucker too. I do like Michael Rucker. I think there's some interesting stuff there too. So we will see. Hunter, are you going to the Stadium Series tomorrow? Yes, I will be there, Sean. Will you be there? Let me know. If any of you guys are going to the Stadium Series tomorrow, let me know. It'd be great. I really haven't met any subscribers of the podcast ever in person. So I almost met one of our – shout out Ben Sweetra. I was debating with him heavily in our DMs and Twitter today, which was fun. Always a good time. But we were very much debating the Merrifield deal. So that was interesting. Both brought up some good points, I think. And he was at a Phillies game that I was at last year, but just forgot to connect. But it would be great to connect with some of you guys if you are going to be at Stadium Series. Let me know if you're going to be at Citizens Bank Park this year too. I'm going to be there. I already have tickets to a number of games. I'm excited for it. But it'd be great to meet some people who I've debated with, I'm sure, many a time in the comments, and who I've debated with on live stream too. So, Robert, welcome in. I appreciate you, man. Greetings from LA. Hey, greetings from Philadelphia. So, thank you for tuning in, Robert. Let me know your thoughts on the deal. Dave is the boss. What did you have? Yeah, I do very much like Dave. I think he's done a very good job with this team. Similarly enough with the Merrifield deal, the Marsh trade, I did not like that at first. I thought through it a little bit. I liked it more by the end of the day. There's still some things we're going to have to see how that pans out as time goes along. But I think there are a lot of moves where I get mad at Dave and then I think it through and then I appreciate Dave. So credit to Dave for that because he's already thought through without the emotions. He's already thought through way ahead of what I've thought through. So, we'll see. Maybe Merrifield ends up at Cooperstown the way it's going right now with some of the guys that are getting inducted. But that's why we need the call-in show with fans on StreamYard. I would love that, Sean. Unfortunately, we had like a little problem one time with someone. There was something inappropriate got shown on the screen with someone calling in. So that kind of shut down that a couple years ago. I think that was before I first saw you in the comments, Sean. So unfortunately, that may have been before your time. Maybe you were subscribed. I don't know. But that was unfortunate. Never want that to happen. Obviously, I know you, I've seen you and I think I've heard you call in the Philly Take with RB's show before, Sean. And I would love to do something like that. I don't exactly know what it takes to get like a landline and all that and how that works. So unfortunately, I'm not too up with that. I would love to do a call-in show at some point, Sean. If I limited to just some of you guys, that would be great. But I know you would probably call in, Sean. I don't know. I don't know how many other people would call in. So, but one of these days, Sean, if you want to get on, we will get you on the show for sure. I mean, I would love to have you on. We have debated a number of times. You have been very gracious. I know I can be stubborn in the comments, but when talking on the streams or face to face, I feel Obviously I can convey my tone much easier. So, hopefully I don't come off as angry as I do in the comments sometimes, because I am very stubborn in my way sometimes when I'm first talking about a take. But yeah, like I said, I came around on the Merrifield deal a little bit today. I still do have concerns about it, but I think earlier in the day my concerns were reasons for why this was a bad deal, and I think transitioning those into, okay, I see the positives now. These are the concerns I have that could potentially arise, but I do understand the signing, and I do think it could work out well. So yeah. Anyway, that was a whole side tangent, but I would love to point back to Colin. I would love to do a Colin show at some point, but unfortunately, it's a little tough to do it right now, and not the best at figuring that out, setting that up. I know how to do it on StreamYard, but again, like I said, we had the problem with that a couple years ago, so I'm banned from those Colin shows. Well, hopefully you wouldn't get banned from ours, Sean. But any last comments, guys? I've been going for an hour here. I feel like I have said all I have to say. I'm very thankful I was able to do the stream. I can't lie. This was all I was thinking, not the stream, but the Merrifield signing was pretty much all I was thinking about at work today. Because I was really going back and forth on it. It was very, even on my drive home, very much on my mind. I just kept going back and forth, figuring out what I wanted to say. And like I said, it's a very good thing I did not go live when this immediately broke. You guys saw me when the Turnbull news broke. I actually was positive on that. But sometimes when I don't feel so great about a signing, it is much better to consider everything, and then weigh the signing pros and cons, and then talk about it a little later. That just works better for me sometimes. So Marlon says the Phillies are better now. I would agree. And if it doesn't work out, I don't think it's a huge problem, but there are some concerns I have with that. So Flyers 4-3 tomorrow, Fairby game winner. Wouldn't that be awesome, man? 1-4-3 in the last Stadium Series, and Giroux had the game winner in overtime. So, yeah. Again, Sean, let me know if you're going to be in any games this year. Marlon, you too. Robert, anyone else who was in here in the stream, let me know if you guys are going to be at CPP this upcoming Phillies season. Let me know if you guys are going to be at Sixers Flyers games. I always like to connect with subscribers if I can. I've always connected with you guys in the comments, but like I said, I've never connected with any of you guys in person. And again, we're trying to grow this. I'm really trying to. I'm sure you guys have kind of noticed, I'm trying to post in the community tab more often. I am trying to focus a lot of our content on Phillies, Flyers, mostly Phillies, to be honest. I feel like we have a good little community here with the Phillies. And yeah, I honestly, I like Phillies is the one I enjoy talking about the most. I can talk Eagles, I can talk Sixers, talk Flyers a little bit with Seth, obviously, when I'm on the streams, and I've been podcasting more with the Flyers than the other teams, but the Phillies are the ones the Phillies are the team that I follow the most, and the one I'm most passionate about, the one I have the most thoughts and the most things to say about, and Drew too. So Drew couldn't make it tonight, unfortunately. I'm wondering if the snow maybe got out to where he is. I don't know. But I'm sure we'll have Drew on the next one, which will be good. And yeah, any last comments from you guys? Marlon, thank you. Appreciate it. Rojas needs to hit. Hopefully he comes into spring training with a consistent bat. Yeah, that is really the wild card, Robert. I mean, again, I said this before. It's going to come down to the in-game reps and the pitch recognition and the plate discipline. And that is something you just need to develop in season, right? You can go down to Winter League. You can do that. I don't think he did that this year. I'm not upset about that, but my point being is, you can only develop it so much in the off season. And like Sean said, you can only bulk up, you can bulk up, but that's not going to fix the plate discipline. So we're just going to have to see how it is in spring, how it is in the regular season, and go from there. Yeah, there will definitely be some Eagles free agents. I don't know how much I'll be doing Eagles coverage, honestly. I'll try to get a little bit of stuff out, but again, like I said, we are trying to get focus a lot on the Phillies content, and we want this to grow. We want this to be something to where we're sitting here at the playoff games next year, maybe even doing a podcast at the ballpark at some point. That would be cool. And talking Phils, doing some big things for the Phillies season. That would be a lot of fun. I do want to do some big things, and I definitely want to talk a lot of Phillies and have this be a place where it's a big Phillies fan base. So I want to grow this with you guys, and you guys are all here watching me right now at 11 at night. I appreciate 11:30 at night. Appreciate each and every one of you. And yeah, we're going to do some big things with the Phillies content this year. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully we are sitting here in October, talking some Phillies playoff baseball. That would be great, with Whit Merrifield hitting the walk-off home run in Game 5 of the NLCS to send us to the World Series. That would be great. Hopefully I can clip this, and then we'll talk about that. But thank you guys for watching. I'm going to end the stream here. Stadium Series tomorrow. There will be a lot of community tab posts about that. Appreciate you, Sean. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. Merrifield Mania. Good way to end the stream. Good. I like that. I like that slogan. Thank you guys for watching. God bless y'all, and enjoy tomorrow. Peace.